So today I'm going to talk about something that's not really talked about and should be, that is known as unconscious bias. According to Freudian psychology, the unconscious are thoughts that we're not really aware are happening, and according to Google's dictionary definition, bias is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way to be considered unfair. Combining these two ideas, unconscious bias is biases that people have that they are not even aware of necessarily. And this is a common theme in both the autistic and disabled communities, both from community members and from the people who interact with them. Bias can be positive or negative, good or bad, and it could happen when people know I have an autism diagnosis or they don't. Like, the main reason I'm so open about my diagnosis is because I get a lot of misunderstandings. You're being stuck up, you're being lazy, why don't you look at me when I'm talking to you? But then, suddenly I explain, I'm autistic, and people are all like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, now I feel bad." It's the kind of fake sympathy that makes you wonder if they really feel bad or they're just sorry they got caught or they were ignorant. I don't know. But either way, the bias is there because they assume that I am kind of being a jerk or something until suddenly they realize that I have a disability and their attitude just shifts. That could be a bias. On the flip side, we've all heard the "stop using your diagnosis as an excuse to be rude." The truth is, almost every time I hear something like that, it's used as a silencing tactic instead of trying to understand the person, and the bias comes in that they're assuming that the person can help how they're being, but they're not. Doesn't mean they're not accountable for their actions if they're being flat out abusive to somebody, but there's assumptions being made based on what they think is going on in the person's head. And then there's the famous "you don't look autistic," which I can make a whole nother video about. But here's the thing. Despite what the media tells you, autism is more than just little white boys that flap their hands and can recite the train schedule. So if that's all you really know, then yeah, you're going to be biased and it's going to seem like nobody else is autistic. But for me personally, the truth is, I'm really not always aware of my volume. I'm not always aware that what I said wasn't something that should be said. Okay, well, I am now because I had to learn from it and I've learned the hard way, but in general, I don't try to be malicious on purpose. And it's a shame to be biased like that because we come in a whole different bunch of races and shapes and sizes and abilities. Some of us might have other disabilities, some of us might be LGBT, the whole thing. And then there's the people with good intentions who know about my diagnosis, who are telling me that they work really hard not to treat me different because of it. But in that statement, there's a bias assuming that different means less of a person. But they kind of missed the point in that I do kind of need to be treated differently because I'm not typical. That doesn't mean you treat me as less of a person, but you take my needs into consideration and you accommodate me based on them. It's really okay to ask me if you have any questions about that. I'm open about it for a reason. That's a common theme when seen interacting with autistic people and people with all disabilities, in that people think that they need to be treated equally. No, there needs to be equitable treatment, in that instead of treating everybody the same, you work to accommodate the person's needs and treat them the way they need to be treated. That's a common bias in the disabled community too. The people look down on disabled adults and smile at them patronizingly and try to help more when they're not asked to be helped because they assume that they're children. But guess what? Disabled adults are still adults and you need to treat them like an adult. And surprise, I have my biases too because everybody does. It's just something you really have to think about. I have to remember not to assume what I think somebody can and can't do, whether they're visibly disabled or not. And I have to remember that not everybody is me, and our experiences may vary, and what works for me might not work for someone else. I'm not perfect, nobody is, and that's okay. You just have to monitor yourself and know where your biases are and think about it. You also have to remember that you might think you're helping somebody, but you might not actually be doing that. I'm open about my differences because I choose to be, but I shouldn't have to disclose every part of who I am to be treated like a person and not be judged for it. So I personally think for all of us to challenge our unconscious bias, we need to keep an open mind, don't assume, and constantly be aware of our own actions and our thoughts.